Great. Thanks for coming on the Gnostic Warrior today, Michael. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. Not too bad. How's yourself?
I'm doing great, thanks. And before we get into the great work that you're doing now, with all the books that you've written, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and your background?
Yep, certainly. My background really is law enforcement. 17 years of law enforcement, which is investigating crime, was investigating scenes of crime, investigating various levels of crime, and piecing together evidence that tells a story and often tells a different story to what eyewitnesses are actually telling you. So my background really was in law enforcement, I say 17 years. All that was to change, however, in 2009, which was quite a pinnacle year for my, what you could say, awakening, whatever you wish to deem it or phrase it. A lot of things happened to me in the year 2009, which turned my world upside down, made me leave my lifelong career and put me on a completely different path to what I was on. So the law enforcement side of it, where I was actually deemed an expert eyewitness in any court in the United Kingdom. So my evidence background, able to spot things that others maybe not be able to see, being able to piece things together. And the sign really is of a good investigator is someone who can make that connection, who can find evidence in one place, find evidence in another place, and piece it together because they can see a similar evidence. They can see a fingerprint at the scene of that crime. Or in my case now, they can see a fingerprint that creates a blueprint for the whole of the ancient world. So in a nutshell, that is really my background, which is an investigative, intuitive, analytical mind that is now coming to a lot of ancient mysticism.
Yeah, that sounds like an incredible background that would help you, look into the ancient mysteries, look into this ancient lost knowledge, and of course, this lost history to piece it together because, a lot of it has been lost or purposely hidden from us for, some unknown reasons. A lot of us do have theories about that. And I'm really intrigued, a lot by the books that you've written and the research that you've done. One of the things that I'd like to talk about before we get into some of the other stuff is something that deals with Gnosticism, and that's really close to my heart, and that's duality. And one of the early books that you had written, let me see here, it's called Earth is an Experiment, Duality is a Game, and Love is the Answer. And I wanted you to, I know it's been a while since you had written that, but just kind of touch on the duality aspect, because, this is a kind of a Gnostic podcast. We do have Gnostic followers, and duality is one of those things that is debated upon in the Gnostic, realm. So.
Yep, certainly. I mean, it was a long, long time ago. I think I understand more about the title now than I did when I actually wrote the title. So when you start looking at geometry, and now really geometry is a blueprint that forms the universe. Now from geometry you can go into sonics, which again then brings us into the likes of Stonehenge and other resonance chambers of the ancient world. You can then get into mathematics, which of course the universe is a mathematical encoded program. But when you start looking at duality, you start looking at the separation from oneness. You start looking at escape, coming outside of oneness to a two-ness, in effect. So when you have the circle, which is oneness, you then have two circles, which is separation. And then when you have two circles interlinked, that becomes the vesica Piscis. Now, inside the vesica Piscis, you have a ratio of 153, which then leads you to the likes of Mary Magdalene, and then you go into the Christ story and things like that. But for me, duality, the highest level of consciousness is non-duality. The realization is that we are all, regardless of the illusion, as Plato once called it, the illusion of the square. We are in the illusion that there is separation, when in the universe, when in our being, when in everything in the universe is actually part of one. It is not separate. That is an illusion. Then when you start looking at beyond duality to non-duality, you then start to become a higher consciousness being when you start to realize that there is no such thing as duality. Duality is simply the effect of a cause, and that cause is wholeness, is oneness. So duality is an illusion. that really keeps us in the box, in the square. And that is really what I was sort of talking about in relation to a dualistic point of view. You know, when we have in the Bible the doubting Thomas, which comes from Didymus, which means the twin mind, what it's really telling you is that when your emotion and your thought become one, you then reconnect to that oneness again. So there's a lot of all this sacred scripture, there's a lot of these sacred monuments, there's a lot of these sacred monoliths that are really telling you about your own God state and how to reconnect to that God state of oneness. So duality is an illusion. It is an illusion of the square.
This duality, have the powers that be, whoever is controlling this earth right now, have they set it up purposely to separate us from the source? And if so, was there a specific reason in your opinion?
The whole of our reality, now whatever people would deem as what reality really is, some people say that we live in a holograph, some people say that we live in a simulation, some people have other theories. This whole reality that we are living in is manufactured to limit the bandwidth of human consciousness, to limit the bandwidth of human development. Now, many, many ancient years ago, the likes of Gnosticism was taught through early Christianity. And then you go into, again, the likes of sacred geometry, which is all in churches. It's all in churches because it has a sacred harmonic that enhances consciousness. And that is why you have beautiful geometry on Islamic buildings, on church buildings. Now, the whole of this reality is manufactured. Now, when ancient Gnosticism was taught in early Christianity, it started to talk about geometric shapes and metaphors and codes. And now certain initiates were able to interpret the ancient mysteries through certain metaphors and through certain codes. That was then outlawed, and it began to be heresy to teach these sacred mysticisms, because the ancient priesthoods of many, many ancient years ago decided that knowledge was for the privileged. It was a sacred information that was only for the worthy and not for the masses. As a result of that, you then started to have the public levels of religion, which gives you the Jesus story, the Noah story, the Moses story, which are really metaphors. All of them are metaphors for a deeper esoteric truth. That esoteric truth is that each and every one of us is Christ. Each and every one of us is Mary Magdalene. Each and every one of us is Noah and Moses. Each and every one of us is Enki and Enlil of the Anunnaki story. Each and every one of us is a potential initiate of the mystery schools of Egypt. Each and every one of us are those who do the rituals at Stonehenge, which are sonic resonance chambers of consciousness, of sonic alchemy, which was taking them to an enlightened state. So all of this secrecy started to get taken from what we now know as the public levels of religion and public levels of history, that tell us that the Great Pyramid was really a burial chamber for the pharaohs, which is complete and utter nonsense. You know, they tell us that people dragged these monoliths, hundreds of ton monoliths, you know, miles and miles from Wales in the UK all the way to Wiltshire on ropes. You know, they tell us that the ancient people with chisels carved these ancient monuments with such laser precision. It's just a ridiculous concept. So the whole of history, the whole of society has been manufactured to create a fabricated reality field. And the reason for that is because these secret brotherhoods, these secret societies, see knowledge as for the worthy and for the privileged. Now, in 2009, I kept getting shown in my mind's eye a golden key. And I really, for some time, I couldn't understand what this golden key was that kept appearing in my mind's eye. And then I'd not for any religious sense, but I'd go to church buildings and cathedrals, and I'd see golden keys on stained glass windows being handed to people. And you start to then realize that this golden key has some kind of significant meaning. And what it really means, it is the key to wisdom. It is the key to ancient knowledge. It is the worthiness being handed down, that you are worthy to accept and receive this ancient knowledge. And that is what the golden key represented. And since that point, you know, I had cryptic messages from psychic mediums who I'd never met, who I'd never spoken to, telling me that when I went to Egypt, I was going to come into all this sacred knowledge that was going to be added to my toolbox. And at the same time, I'd actually just planned to go on vacation to Egypt. Even now, I have mathematical formulas in what you would class as a dream state, but they're not a dream state, where, the last one I had was just figures of a square root symbol followed by 937. And when I actually looked into the square root of 397, it took me all the way back to the mystery schools of Egypt and into wisdom and into insight. Just the other night, I had a dream that wasn't a dream that was telling me how in a part of these initiations in the Egyptian temples, these beings were able to manifest by using certain frequencies. And if they're tuned into a certain frequency, they would simply appear. It's almost like we would use an elevator. I want level 117, so you press the button. I want level 2, you press the button. They were doing it by frequency. And when you look at the ancient, again, alchemy, sonic alchemy, sound alchemy, they were using sound waves to create the frequency to create an enlightened state. All of this has remained a sacred mystery to the modern day. Now, modern day science, which is also keeping a lot of this from us, modern day science is simply an ancient secret. So modern day science, when it tells us about light and it tells us about vibration, it tells us about the universe, is something that the ancients knew many, many thousands of years ago. You look at DNA, how the ancient Egyptians knew advanced DNA. When you look at the writers of the Bible, when they did the book of Genesis, which is really the book of genetics, the book of genes, they talk about atoms, genetics, DNA, and they had all this advanced knowledge that has been kept deliberately, in my view, from the public, because they want to keep us in this low bandwidth of a low of vibration. And in order to do that, they're then able to create what is the third dimensional reality. That then goes back into the duality and the illusion of the square. And of course, in geometry, the square is the imposition of structure. It is the imposition of limitation. And when we start squaring the circle, we then start connecting physicality with matter, with spirituality. And that is really the Vitruvian Man, the square in the circle. And again, when you look at the Egyptian Isis and you look at the Egyptian Osiris, which is the goddess and god, Osiris represents number 5. And Isis represents number 5 and Osiris represents number 6. That is basically squaring the circle musically in sonics. And that is all to do, again, with enlightenment frequencies, which is what all the Egyptian pyramids and all the Stonehenge, the pyramids of Tikal, the Vatican, all of these churches, everything is down to sonic enlightenment. And that is all being kept away. The method and the formula is being kept away from the modern day public.
And let's talk a little bit about those secret brotherhoods that you believe have kept these secrets, this knowledge from humanity. Do you believe that this was essentially, the Freemasons and Rosicrucians, or was this kind of a top-down order by, say, a king that had organized these secret brotherhoods, or who had given these secret brotherhoods certain charters and rights? And to add on to that question, when I research everything, Michael, here we are talking in the year 2019. You're over in the pond, the UK. I'm here in the U.S., a country that was started by Freemasons as well. And, to play devil's advocate, we're able to kind of be conduits for this knowledge. I believe that there is a higher power over us, definitely watching and so forth. And I believe they're giving us the freedom to pursue this gnosis. And for you, Michael, to be a conduit for this knowledge and to discover these secrets. And you're able to share these now around the world. Do you believe that maybe they decided to suppress this information for a certain amount of time in order to control it so they could release it globally? Because when I researched back at that time, 2,000, 4,000 years ago, we had all these various tribes and sects. I see that, knowledge and gnosis was a worldwide religion, but we were all warring with one another all the time. And again, correct me if you believe I'm wrong. So my theory is that they suppress the knowledge in order to bring it back one day. And of course, whoever's in control of that knowledge, the nobles, I always believe the nobles were able to know. That's why they were in control of the knowledge. Do you believe that that's a possibility, or do you believe that they're closing down on that right now?
I think it's a good viewpoint. Certainly, I've had many who you deem as Illuminati groups in America and other places that have attempted to recruit me into their ranks. I've had several people who are part of these secret societies. Now, I would actually turn that round and say societies with secrets, because, of course, there are many tiers within these brotherhoods. And it's only when you reach the top levels that you are coming into this true sort of Gnostic knowledge. And I've had many of them turn around and say how accurate the information that I'm now putting out is, and how it would take initiates of these societies many, many years to reach the same level of knowledge. And I've turned down their invites to join these societies, despite the promise of this, that, and the other. I think, excuse me, I think it's maybe a good viewpoint that you make when you think that, has it been suppressed for a certain time frame? To me, it has all the hallmarks of something that has been timed. To me, the awakening of humanity has all the hallmarks and all the feelings of being set, timed, where more and more people now than ever, I think, are beginning to question. They are beginning to realise that there is something totally wrong, totally amiss in this reality, in this portrayal of life. I think more and more people now are starting to ask questions and starting to think outside of this illusion of the square, outside of the box. And I think with that, more and more people come into this sacred knowledge. And it does have all, to me, it certainly has that intuitive feeling that it has been timed, but it's been timed by a higher force to be revealed at a certain time. And when you start looking at some of the ancient monuments, which are really, they're almost derelict, empty buildings, because they're at some point, whoever were using them is sort of just up and left. And when you look at, the likes of Stonehenge, you look at the likes of crop circles, which are containing diatonic ratios, which are encrypted and coded messages within sound that are able to be deciphered by the wise ones that were using these monoliths as ritualistic sonic sites. And again, when you start looking at how some of the information comes to me, when you start looking at communication that is beyond the normal knowledge base, that expresses itself as intuition or an inspiration, you then start to realise that there's a bigger power at work, that there's a larger force at work that is feeding information or is making it possible for humanity to access this information. And I think this is the way that the ancients used to. Now when I've looked into each and every ancient culture, initially as an individual entity, what I have actually found is a blueprint that actually connects them by the same knowledge base. Now, they're either being fed that knowledge base, or they're all connected into what you would call a morphogenetic grid, which is where that species has access to certain information that is inputted by that species.
Yeah. Okay. And let's talk about that species real quick. And sorry, your knowledge is immense, Michael. But I wanted to kind of touch on that for the listeners. Is when you say species, and you were talking about grids and different energy areas, do you believe that certain areas of the Earth have a specific species of hominids that would be us now, that are specific homelands, possibly, that, of course, maybe if we were to go back to or to live on, we would be more, in tune with our true environments?
I think so. When you look at where all these ancient sites are actually situated, now that they're all situated by entities or people or humanoids or space people, however you wish to, or whatever they turn out to be, they were put in certain positions for certain reasons. Now, again, when you look at Stonehenge, which is on St. Michael's ley line that goes through the whole of the south of England, that really is the dragon of St. George and the dragon. Now, when you overcome the dragon, you become the Arthur Pendragon, the Dragon Master. You become the Christed Serpent Rider. That is really the sons of the dragon, which are the Hierophants, which are the Hermetics. Now, these stone monoliths, which are conduits, will put on certain magnetic energy lines of the most enhancement. And that is why you have certain monoliths in certain locations. That is why you have pyramids in certain locations. That is why you have Makapaku, the mountains, which is really an ascension school. When you have all of these ancient cultures that are telling you about the endocrine system of the human brain, the endocrine means secretion within. Secretion is the three master glands of the third eye system, the thalamus, the pineal gland, and the pituitary gland. When you look at the Great Pyramid of Egypt, and I've done this, and you put a map overlay of the human head facing north, because north is the north gate, is the pineal gland, you will see that is a giant replica marking the exact location of all three master glands of the human brain. It is telling you the pathway and the portal to your enlightenment. And the ancients were telling us this, and they were putting these monuments in certain places around the earth to enhance the maximum arterial energy of earth in order to act as these power stations, these grids, to enhance sonic frequencies. When you start looking beyond earth and you start looking at mathematical proof that the likes of Stonehenge locates the face on Mars, when you start looking mathematically, hidden in the grid vectors, the longitude and latitude of the Great Pyramid, it tells you how to find the Sardinian city on planet Mars. When you look at the face on Mars, within its longitude and latitude, it gives you the grid vector location of Stonehenge in the United Kingdom. When you get a map overlay of Avebury, which is in Wiltshire, the United Kingdom, where Stonehenge sits, you put it on top of Sardinian city, it is an exact map overlay. When you look at how these ancient monuments mapped a planisphere, you see that Silbury Hill was Earth and Mars, and you see the map of Sardinian city has an altar of witness, which is the Silbury Hill Mound. All of these things are correlation, and there's quite clearly, through mathematical proof, there's quite clearly some kind of connection between Mars, Earth, and also the moon, and even Phobos, one of the moons, where you have obelisks, which takes you back to ancient Egypt. There's quite clearly a galactic correlation going on between these planets that prove that these ancients had connection not only on Earth, but they also had connection to either star people or they were the star people, and they were able to create portals to go to other places. They were put on certain locations of Earth by entities who knew exactly where to put them. And all of this is an exact ancient advanced science.
Yeah, and Michael, let's talk a little bit about these places and specifically maybe to a current event right now. And again, I don't want to touch on something that you might not be aware of or have researched, but of course you know of the recent Notre Dame event. And I was wondering if, in your opinion, do you have any opinion on that event, on possibly why it happened? You know, that was one of the most well-known Christian symbols in all of Europe, and one of the most beautiful Gothic structures. And, it's interesting that, the Vatican has essentially been in control of it for quite a long time. And then President Macron, the states, I believe, in control of the property. So it's a weird kind of setup. But, there's rumors about it coming out as, a multi-faith type of center, as opposed to just a Catholic kind of thing. So I was just wondering if you had any theories as far as to, is this maybe on one of those energy grids, since it's such an important Christian site, and anything in relation to the recent fires there and of course the renovations that are going to happen.
Of course. I mean, again, Vatican comes from Vatica, which means the third eye. Again, that's why you have lots and lots of pine cones around the Vatican City. So they, again, are talking about a higher consciousness in relation to that as well. All churches, all cathedrals are symmetrically situated upon ley lines for maximum energy. That is why you see beautiful geometric shapes, because geometry stimulates both hemispheres of the brain, which then connects you to a higher awareness, a universal consciousness. That is why some of the pillars of these things are circular pillars, because energy travels better in circles. Every church, every cathedral is a symmetrical geometric shape. The designs of cathedrals and the designs of churches are based upon the canon, which are the divine proportions of the human body. The human body is basically the universe in miniature. It is the miniature divine. That is where we then start to get the Star of Bethlehem, which is the pentagram, which is the Star of Bethlehem that led the wise men to that inner realization. That is the Star of Bethlehem. Why did King Herod, why was he unable to see it? Because that is a metaphor that he lacked the wisdom to see the ancient mysteries. We are talking about the universe in miniature. We are talking about an underlying esoteric message that these churches are really representing a higher consciousness, not what people are learning as part of the congregation when they go into these churches, but these churches are holding a lot of mysticism. When you look at cathedral, it means seat. What does that mean? It means the seat of the mind, which is the pineal gland. When you start looking at the word bishop, it means the watcher, which means he who is awake. It's talking about consciousness. When we start looking at hymns, and how many church aisles represent the throat chakra. Now, the throat chakra is the fall of man, because we began to curse instead of praise. What do you find inside the throat chakra? You find the Adam's apple. It is the fall of man. It is the Adam. It is the fall of man, the Adam's apple. So when things happen, such as this, always be mindful to look at the dates in which they occur. When you have the likes of 9/11, when you have the likes of 7/7 in London, when you have the likes of all of these massacres in Waco and wherever that happened on the 19th of April, in the occult calendar, dates represent something. They all have numerical meaning, and it also enhances the effect of these events. I watched something recently that analysed the Notre Dame fire and the dates and the Hebrew and the Kabbalah, which again is Jewish mysticism. When you start looking at Hebrew, you start to realise that Hebrew is really a spiritual language, and certain dates are of certain significance. I would say to anybody watching this, watch the YouTube video about the Notre Dame and the occult and the Kabbalah, and it will bring up a real analytical view of why the fire may have occurred at a particular time on a particular date. Of course, the official story is it's some kind of electrical fire, but there are too many things that are going on certain significant dates for it to be completely disregarded. I think when something happens, you do have to look, not with a complete conspiratorial mind, because that can take you astray. That can take you, that can take you to all kinds of rabbit holes that you don't need to be down. But just bear in mind that certain dates have astronomical significances, and that is why these things occur on certain dates. So it's to be borne in mind, but not to be carried away with. But certainly churches, cathedrals, where they're situated symmetrical to each other, is all to do with ley lines, it's all to do with earth energy, it's all to do with geometry, and it's all to do with higher consciousness. And that is what the ancient builders of these monuments, again, were really telling us.
What I find interesting, Michael, and that's a great explanation. Thank you. A lot of these monuments, and we look at the pyramids as well. They're built of limestone, and limestone seems to have incredible healing and resonance properties. So these buildings were made to last, obviously, and with this fire, it did burn a significant part of it, but a lot of it was not damaged as well, and it was preserved. And you mentioned the geometrical shapes, the stained glass windows, and the architecture in that building is some of the most beautiful that I've ever seen. I haven't been there personally, but it's just interesting, the things that are going on. We have a possible, another French Revolution brewing right now at the same time, right? We have the, Freemasons who, none of them are claiming as far as any credit or anything, but they're going to be involved, of course, in the rebuilding of it, and it's kind of like we're going to an operative kind of Freemasonic type of thing. And Freemasons from all around the world, I mean, essentially stonemasons and experts will be going in there to rebuild it. So it's just interesting. And I know there was another fire at the place where the first Templars were housed. I don't know exactly. I wrote about it, but I don't have it from the top of my head right now. But yeah, you can get into the conspiratorial side of it. And I don't recommend that, but there is a lot of fascinating research when you get into the dates. And let's talk about dates and calendars. My understanding is our dates and calendars are not what we think they are, and a lot of them are off. So we are actually living in a different time than we are actually living in now. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense because, again, when you start looking about how the calendar was changed by the Romans, we used to have April as the first month of the year. Now, when you start looking at what October means and what December means, you got 10, you got 8, you got September, which is 7. The current calendar doesn't make any sense when you look at it in those terms. So quite obviously, it has been changed because September is now the 9th month and so on. So that was actually changed. So the calendar has been changed. When you start looking at the alphabet hides many, many different codes. And obviously that is the basis of the English language. Just an example, when you start looking at 26 letters of the English alphabet, there are 260 chapters of the New Testament. Now, when you start looking at number 26, it is the Hertz frequency of Yahweh, the tetragrammation of Yahweh, which takes you into the Kabbalah, into Jewish mysticism. When you start looking at the Kabbalah's 22 letters of the alphabet, you then start looking at harmonic tones, harmonic frequencies. When you start looking at the English alphabet and how if you separate it into 2 sets of 13, you then start getting pi, and you start getting all kinds of the G of the Masonic compass. There's all of these hidden codes within, letters, within words, within alphabets, within calendars. So it's quite obviously another tool in which all of the secret information has been hidden from the people. So in reality, April is the first month. January is not the first month, but it's all been changed. And certain dates, again, astronomically, are quite significant in occultism. Occult just meaning hidden. It's nothing, nothing more or nothing less than that, really. It just means it's hidden, and there's lots of information hidden within numbers, within words, within gematria, within all of these harmonics that also represent letters and words and gematria. So yes, we are living on a changed timeline, and we are living in a world where codes and symbols rule, not the verbal language that we're speaking now.
I know that when Augustus Caesar had came into rule after his father, as far as the history that was passed down, one of the first things he did when he had conquered Egypt and Greece was to, do away with that calendar. And I know that July was added for his father Julius and August for himself, Augustus. So, definitely that's when knowledge went down big time. And you read the history, the church fathers talks about, crushing the Gnostics in the East, and all the different Gnostic schools and the learning schools that were remaining were essentially, crushed, and they had a big propaganda campaign against those Gnostic schools and a lot of the Gnostic leaders at that time, and it's interesting that you have the Freemasons that, they talk about this knowledge, that it was incorporated into their teachings. And when I research, a lot of the Masonic writings, I find a lot of great knowledge, not, of course, the secrets of the universe, but you find a lot of truth. So if you search, you shall find, I believe. And I'm under the assumption that we're going to head to that Gnostic world again. And they talk about that Eliphas Levi and these occult writers that some say are part of the conspiracy. Again, it's up to speculation. You have Eliphas Levi, you have Manly P. Hall, who was a 33rd degree Freemason, and they talk about the apocalypse of St. John basically being a Gnostic revelation. And people say we are in the apocalypse, which essentially is just a lifting of the veil. So it's just real interesting, the times that we're in. And it's important, that you had said, we don't get too conspiratorial with that, So let's get a little bit into the Jesus and the Vatican work that you've done. You posed the question, what does the Vatican and the Church really know about our history? And this conspiracy has carried on, literally to this very day. And do you believe that the Pope and the Vatican play a big part in the big revealing, or are they the complete opposite of that?
Again, I suppose it depends on what level of the Vatican we're talking about. when you look at what the parishioners are taught, when you look at what many priests are taught as being the truth, it is a version of history that is really fictional, and billions of people throughout the world have been caught on the hook of that particular fisherman's net and that particular fisherman's reel. Now, the Vatican know, the heads of the Vatican know the truth. They know that it's really a metaphor for a deeper, hidden truth. Now, when you look at the likes of Pope Leo X, many hundreds of years ago, that said it has served us well, this myth of Christ. When you look at the current Pope, Pope Francis, in 2017 at a Catholic Mass, has publicly said, or documented to have said, Jesus is metaphorical, not literal. Now, what they have done is they've managed to completely conceal the Gnostic truth. Now, the Gnostic truth is the knowledge of self. And what people have actually been taken away is that knowledge of self, because they're forever waiting for that outside source as a salvation. Now, while they continue to wait for that outside source as a salvation, they will never get their own temple of God, which is their body, which is the Garden of Eden, which is the biblical Jonah and the whale. They will never ever get that in order. They will never ever reach that salvation or that enlightenment, because they are forever getting further and further away from themselves. So the ethos of the Bible really, when you look at it at its true deeper levels, is a scientific ascension book that tells you ways in which to reach your God state, as the Egyptians would put it, to reach your higher self, your Christ consciousness. Now, there's many facets of Masonry that also talk about this. Why are there 33 degrees of Masonry, or certainly the highest public levels that we know about? Because when you look at your own Jacob's ladder, your own spine, there are 33 vertebrates. When you get to the 33rd vertebrae, it is known medically as Atlas. That then leads you into the mythical island of Atlantis, which is really talking about the pineal gland, which is the island that rules 7. It is the master gland that rules your 7 chakras. Now, the number 7 is spiritual perfection. Now, when Plato talks about Atlantis being the island that rules 7, the pineal gland is in the center of the brain, in between the 2 hemispheres, surrounded by the cerebrospinal fluid. It is therefore an island. It is the master gland that rules the 7 island, the spinning wheels of the chakras, which is activated by your kundalini. Now, the kundalini is either the serpent of wisdom, which is on the ascent, your Christ, or if it meets ego or some kind of negative polarity, it becomes the descending serpent, which comes from the kingdom of heaven, which is the higher chakras, and it descends into the kingdom of earth, which is the lower chakras, which is your Sodom and Gomorrah that is destroyed by this kundalini serpent fire. Early Christians called this descending serpent the devil. Now, it's basically telling you that you have all of these spiritual facets within you that will enable you to raise to your God state. Now, in Masonry, their blazing star is Sirius, the planet Sirius, which has connotations to the goddess Isis, which is why one of the chambers of the pyramid faces the star frequencies of Sirius A. That is the blazing star. That is the frequency, the star frequency, that is used in the initiation of the 33rd degree of Masonry. Now, where does Masonry come from? Mother Sun. The Mother Sun is the grand central sun, which is Sirius. So we have a lot of this esoteric information. It is the sun behind the sun. So when you get to the high degrees of Masonry, they are telling you esoterically. And even Walt Disney, he was a 33-degree Mason, has put it in all of his children's stories. You have the likes of Frozen, where you have Elsa, which means she knows, or he, she knows. You have the North Mountain, which is the pineal gland. You then go to Pinocchio, and you see the blue fairy, which is the haze of Sirius, which is the star that brings you luck. Then you have the song Wish Upon a Star. You have Pinocchio, that means pine eye, which is the pineal gland. It is telling you, even in children's stories, through Walt Disney, through Masonry, it is telling you about this esoteric raising of self. So when you look at the likes of Moses. Moses represents the enlightened mind. When he's on the top of the mountain, which means an enlightened higher state, mountain, and is there with the burning bush. The burning bush is the inner illumination of your third eye, your pineal gland, illuminated by the inner fire, that Christ fire. The word pyramid means the fire of God in the mind. So we're talking about this inner illumination, and the reason there are 10 commandments is the number 10. 1 is male, 0 is female, number 10 is the divine amalgamation of masculine and feminine, divine balance. That is why Egyptian mummies and the symbol of Osiris is the X across the chest. That is the symbol of the Vatican cross keys, which is the union of masculine and feminine across the central heart. It's talking about divine balance that enables us to raise on Christ consciousness. Now, the Hertz frequency of Christ consciousness is 33 Hertz, which again leads into 33 degrees of masonry, 33 vertebrates. But Jesus died at 8:33 in 33 AD. That is because Christ consciousness is 33 Hertz. It is really telling us Moses is the enlightened mind. When you look at Noah, it means Nunchet, which means life in the water. He's talking about the creation of the human being. You know, when you start looking at Mary Magdalene, as I alluded to slightly earlier, when you start looking at the interlinked circles, which becomes the Vesica Piscis, inside the interlinked circles of the Vesica Piscis is 153, a ratio of 153. When you look at the name Mary Magdalene in Greek, in gematria, it equals 153. It is the yoni, it is the divine feminine, it is how the human being is created. It's the Sophia, it is the Christ Sophos, the wisdom of Christ. There's all these hidden secrets inside. When you look at Jesus himself, Jesus is the solar force within that is sexual sublimation. Now, when you start using the likes of celibacy, which the church has completely misinterpreted, that they use celibacy as a sexual suppression instead of realigning, redirecting sexual energy in order to raise your Christ. Now, the Hathas tell you that when you retain this sexual energy, it actually raises up into your solar plexus, which is your biblical Bethlehem. So this Christ is born in Bethlehem, and it goes all the way through the chakras, all the way through the body, through the optic chasism, which is the cross. Now, to crucify also means to subdue one's appetite. So again, we're talking about sexual sublimation, which is the retention and the correct use of solar celibacy, which is the Christ force within. It is the ascending serpent that then goes into Golgotha, is crucified in Golgotha, which is your skull. Golgotha means the place of skulls. It is the human mind, it is the human head, where the Christ sits with the 12 disciples, which are the 12 cranial nerves. Now, when those 12 cranial nerves are the messengers of the brain to the body, that is why there are 13. There is Christ and 12. 13 means many into one. It is becoming that unified consciousness, that unified mind that takes us to beyond the crown of thorns into return to the Father. And those 3 wise men and the Christ in the tomb for 3 days, Jonah in the belly of the whale for 3 days, the 3 days of darkness in the plagues of Egypt is all talking about the 3 woes, which are the 3 days of initiation, which take you from the belly of the whale, which is the body, all the way through to the initiate, to the solar force, to the enlightened being, is the 3 days. That is why Jesus Christ spent 3 days in the tomb. When you open the tomb, you are coming out of Plato's cave, you are coming out of spiritual darkness, and you are entering into true light. And that is really the metaphor of the Christ being resurrected out of the tomb. Resurrection means to use again, and that is really that sexual energy that is being reused by your body. Of course, he goes a lot deeper than that, and there's a lot more facets to the story than that. But in a nutshell, it's really talking about the solar force within, which is activated by your Kundalini. If it rises up, it is the Christ. If it descends down for any reason, it becomes the descending serpent, which is the devil. And that is really all of these things that are being kept. Hell doesn't exist. Heaven is really the higher mind. And the king, hell really is what it's really talking about, is your root chakra, your lower chakra, which is known as the underworld, where this Kundalini, coiled serpent, remains dormant in the red root chakra. That is the fire of hell, until some spiritual action takes place in order for this Kundalini serpent to rise, to become your Christ within. and you then become the Christ rider, the serpent rider. And that is really the significance of the wisdom of the serpent. So there's lots and lots of hidden mysteries. Jesus was never an individual, neither was Mary and Joseph, neither was Moses, Noah. All of these characters is really talking about ourselves.
So this devil, this other energy we all have within us, and we could either, make it rise, or we could to Golgotha, to the skull, or we could descend down with the serpent and the devil. It seems like the whole of the world was set up for the devil, and you have the Bible saying that the devil was in charge and the god of this world right now, right? At least right now.
Well, when you look at where the word Satan comes from, it's really the planet Saturn. And when you look at the former name of Rome, it was Saturnalia. Now, where does the significance come in? Well, hallowed be thy name. Halo, hallowed, the ring of Saturn. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That is the inner Kundalini awakening. It is really talking about the transition of consciousness. And when you start looking at, give us this day our daily bread, it's talking about the quintessence, which is really the use of sexual energy that takes you to the fifth element, the stepping out of the four, which is again the symbol of Inri across Jesus, which is the material, the four elements. You step out of the four to become the fifth element. That is the pentagram. That is humanity being the universe in miniature. That is the sacred Star of Bethlehem that Herod couldn't see because he lacked the wisdom to see the knowledge.
Sure. With that fifth point, just real quick, because you're very going very fast here, and you're very, very knowledgeable. Would that fifth point, in your opinion, be us in charge of the four elements within?
Yes.
Okay.
The tetragrammaton is the material realm. It is the four. We have four cardinal points. We have four seasons. We have a lot of things relating to four. When you reach the ether, the fifth element, the top of the pentagram, the star on the Christmas tree, the pentagram of Washington DC or whatever, it is really talking about the five winds of Christ. It is talking about mastery of the material realm, mastery of the four. When you step out of the four, you become part of the fifth element, which is the ether, which is your returning to your God state. That is why there's so many significant things that relate to five. When you look at famous logos, let's just take the computer company Dell, for argument's sake, and many others. Why does the letter E always look different to the other letters? Because E is the fifth letter of the alphabet, and the number 5 is the pentagram. It is the ether. It is total knowing. It is realized man. That is why we have all of this symbology hidden. So the number 5 is really stepping out of the 4, stepping out of the limitation of the material realm.
Do you believe a lot of these corporate giants, you mentioned Michael Dell now, you have, of course, Starbucks, you have all these different corporate giants using these symbols, and as you say, signs and symbols rule the world, right? So do you believe that a lot of these corporate executives or these founders were into the esoteric a little bit secretly, or they came up with an invention and someone in marketing knows about this type of stuff and made sure that Michael Dell had those symbols with him when he brought his products to the market? What are your thoughts there?
Whoever designed these brand names, these logos, have an esoteric knowledge. You could choose any one of your automobiles. You can look at the double chevron, which is Shibuya, which means the place of connection, which is where the material meets the spiritual, which is why you have a double chevron above the entrance of the Great Pyramid. Whoever's designing these logos understand this esoteric geometry, understand that by looking at geometry, you can actually stimulate 2 hemispheres of the brain, which then tunes you in to this hyper communication. Now, hyper communication is really when you go outside of your own normal knowledge base and you start to receive inspiration, you start to receive intuition, you start to receive that inner guidance. That is really hyper communication, when you are tuning in to something greater than your average self. And so somebody somewhere knows about this.
Yeah, Michael, and I just wanted to touch there because I know the audience are probably very interested in that type of stuff. And, personally, I wanted to share just a quick personal experience with me, a couple quick ones. One time going to Washington, D.C., and I was standing on the back of the Lincoln Memorial, and I was looking directly down at the Washington Monument, which we know is a big obelisk. And I was there with a friend, and I wasn't there for any esoteric reasons at the time. I was just a tourist. I had no idea about the occult or anything about what went on there, or even Freemasons at the time, to be honest with you. And I was there, and I had a out of body experience. I literally just started vibrating, and I'm listening to my friend. He's not having the same experience, but it just started vibrating, and I felt just like out of body, and I felt just this intuition like I'd been there before, and time just seemed to stand still. And it was just one of the most incredible experiences as far as just my body and my mind and how I felt. Never felt like that again until I went to Sedona, Arizona. It wasn't as, I'd say, as impactful as the Washington, D.C. experience. But, of course, I would think that the builders of the United States of America, with Freemasons being involved in the building of Washington, D.C., that they knew about these energies, and that the Capitol was specifically built there with, of course, the obelisk of Washington playing a big part in the vibrations that I was feeling at the time. It was unbelievable. And, all that stuff is made of limestone, mind you, right? So, and then you have water, right? A big, long water stretch between the two. And I was just like, so it's just weird. And that was, I feel like from then on, my awakening happened, but I was really crazy at first, meaning, I was very conspiratorial, very like this, but I was looking for truth, but it was just, I couldn't find it, because it's just a chaotic world out there, as they say, order ab chaos. So I wanted to kind of share that experience as my experience. And I know other people probably have had experiences like that. These power energy places, are these the places to go to really tap into this unadulterated energy?
Certainly, because they were put there for a specific reason, and they were put there by people who knew where to locate these things. And yes, when you start looking at Washington, D.C., District of Columbia, which is ISIS, when you start looking at the Statue of Liberty, which is ISIS, it faces Paris, which was a Celtic group, the Parisi that worship ISIS. When you start looking at Sirius A, when you start looking in Egyptian hieroglyphs, the symbol for Sirius, it is the obelisk, it is the dome, it is the pentagram star, which is your Washington, D.C. There are, when you look at Washington, D.C., really the names of it are based on Rome. When you have Capitoline Hill, you have Capitol Hill. You had a Roman Senate, you have a Senate in Washington, D.C. All of these things tend to be connected. And again, the blueprint that I've found, when you look at the word America, Amaruka, which means the land of the feathered serpents. When you look at Quetzalcoatl, that is really talking about Kukulkan, which is the serpent at the base of the spine, which is Kundalini. All of these things are telling us through a blueprint, through a similar knowledge base, or an exact knowledge base of inner enlightenment. And that really is the blueprint that I found. And as I say, when I initially started, and I also started in a conspiracy field as well, when everything was a conspiracy, and somebody'd look at you in the street and they were a secret agent. And I think that can really be, it can be a harmful thing, and I personally have had my phones tapped. I have personally had my emails stolen by organisations, government organisations. Now that is not a conspiracy theory, that is a fact that I've been able to prove. And that they've stolen and selected and copied and whatever to phones and to emails. It's not helpful to be in a conspiracy circuit, but it is worth stepping back and actually having a look at the greater picture. Now, this blueprint that I've found, and as I say, I've looked at things individually, and I've looked at the South Americans, the Mayans, the Sumerians. When you have the Anunnaki scrolls that Zechariah Sitchin translated, I have a completely different translation to him. When you look at them, when you look again, Peru, when you look at Egypt, when you look at Mexico, when you look at the UK, when you look at even Russia, when you look, I have found a link that connects all of them. Even the elongated skull mystery of Egypt, of Stonehenge, they've even found elongated skulls in Russia. Now, elongated skulls is all to do with sonic dynamics. It's to do with certain things during natal gestation that were able to change the shape of the cranium. It is all to do with sonic frequency, which was enhancing consciousness. And again, you look at, they found them at Stonehenge, they found them in Egypt, they've even found elongated skulls in Russia, in the Russian Stonehenge. It was, all of these things are connected by a knowledge base, by a hidden secret message that they were practicing, that they were doing as a ritual, and what is there for to be found should we wish to see the ancient mystery, which is the pentagram. If we wish to follow the sacred mystery, which is that Star of Bethlehem, to that inner divine realization, we will follow that Star of Bethlehem to our own inner Christ. Most people are the King Herod, who lack the wisdom to see the knowledge. That is the metaphor of the story. And if we follow that pentagram, we will find that inner divine realization. We will become the Christed being that is the metaphor of that particular story.
In your opinion, Michael, why do so many people look outside of themselves? And of course, I'm guilty myself, you know, and especially in the beginning of my path, you know, when I feel that I was, you know, woke. I was far from woke at that time, but kind of awoken to the reality that I was in, that it wasn't really what I was told or what I thought it was. But why do a lot of us look outside of ourselves, and we're looking, as opposed to doing that self work, that hard work on ourselves? Because if we truly look at it and we're to work on ourselves and find the Christ within each one of us, and to work on ourselves and our families, and then of course, you know, we could share with others. That doesn't mean that we live in a cocoon and we're hermits, you know, but a lot of it is self work. Why is it human nature today in the year 2019 to always be looking outside and to kind of understand these teachings, but just procrastinate and sit there? And again, I'm guilty of that myself, Michael. So can you maybe touch on that, and is it part of the magic that's upon us, and maybe give some people advice out there?
Certainly, you know, the kingdom of God is within you, and that was said for a particular reason. If you look at the way society is structured, if you look at the way in which society is programmed, if you look at the way in which society has been programmed for many hundreds, many thousands of years, and that programming goes literally from one generation to the next generation to the next generation. Now, there are so many children that I see that are Catholic, or they're Jehovah's Witness, or they're a Muslim, or they're a Christian, purely because their parents are, and they get fitted into that programmed belief system. When you start looking at the way in which this intrinsic genius has been bestowed upon us for many thousands of years, the whole of this reality field is a programmed reality field where people are merely photocopies of everyone else. Society turns you into a photocopy, not an individual. And that is why people look outside of themselves, because they believe themselves, or they've been told that they are themselves just flesh and blood. They are nothing. They are someone that goes to work, earns their taxes, and they are nothing. And the whole of society is structured that way. People are given a salary which is, in many cases, insufficient, but in even more cases, just sufficient to allow them to survive in this materialistic world. You have to look at the program of many hundreds, many thousands of years, generation after generation, to understand why people see and view the world, and even view themselves the way in which they do, how they are worthless, how they can make no difference, how they are all part. They must wear a certain logo, they must wear a certain company brand, otherwise they're cast out of society, they're cast out of college, they're cast out of school, because they don't fit in to that normality. For me, from the age of 6 or 7, I always questioned what was normal. I always questioned reality. I always realised I was different. I felt different. I never wore these brand logos. I didn't care one cahoot if people liked me at school or not. I didn't care if I was a member of the group that was the it group, that was the fashionable group. I always stayed away from that because I understood I was an individual. I was happy with my individuality. And I think more and more people are beginning to have that kind of consciousness awakening, but there are still an overwhelming majority that are a photocopy because they follow a photocopy, and they follow a dogma, and they follow a program. They follow a programmed reality, that you must worship something, or you must worship an icon, or you must carry a cross around with you. The cross is the symbol of female and male genitalia, going back to that Christ force of celibacy, that solar force. When you look at the cross of St. Peter, it's talking about the upside down cross, which is the ninth sphere, which is, you can only escape the ninth sphere by the correct use of that sexual energy, that sexual alchemy, the sexual force. That is the cross of St. Peter. When you look at Peter, it means Petros, it means rock, it means hard, it means erection. It's talking about sex. Now, you can either use that sexual energy for compassion, which is the Christ, or you can use it for passion, which is Satan. That is the sexual energy. That is the rising or the descending serpent, the Christ or the devil. People are worshipping icons that will never come to save them, because the only people that can save them is their self. The only salvation that we have is the salts of the body, the soul, the salvation, the spinal fluid that enhances the Kundalini awakening within. And far too many people are photocopies of each other. They want to fit in rather than be individual. And that is a lot to do with a programmed mind. And that programming is an act of brilliance that has been going on for many, many hundreds, thousands of years.
Yeah, and what I find hard, Michael, here is that, I understand, and I'm with you 100% on what you're saying here. The hard part is adopting and working on thyself and being authentic in a plastic world, right? In a simulated reality where it's quite the opposite, where it seems these fake people get ahead, right? And they're this world revolves around money. I'm here in Southern California, where the cost of rent where I'm living is average $3,000 for a decent house. That's per month, and then the food is just astronomical, and then our gas, and it makes it really tough. So I'm an entrepreneur. I had started a business because I get it. You have to make money. Money is energy in this satanic world, right? So what do we do to kind of to live in this duality, because it is a duality, and if we seek to work on thyself and be the best that we could be, and then as soon as we walk out that door, it's led by the devils out there, and they'll eat you alive, and you will not make any money, or you'll make very little. And if you got a family to support, I'm not saying sell yourself to the devil, but it seems like you have to kind of have a little both, to live. And to make it, and especially with a business, because it's really a dog eat dog world. So what are your thoughts there?
It's extremely difficult, because it's made to be extremely difficult. Now, when you mentioned a phrase earlier on, which was order out of chaos. Now the true meaning of order out of chaos is to go within self, because that is where the order is, amongst the chaos that is going around. That is the real order out of chaos. It is made so difficult if you are not rolling the same way as everyone else. It's extremely difficult. The person who swims against the stream is the one that gets tired the quickest, and it's made extremely difficult for you to make it. Why is it that you can go into McDonald's and buy a burger for 99 cents? If you wish to have an healthy organic salad, it costs you $6 or $7. Why? Because it's made that way. So you are enticed into that environment, into that realm. For me, again, as we alluded to at the beginning of the show, the highest level of consciousness is non-duality. When you realize that, when you say it's an illusion, it seems a ridiculous comment, because people go out there and they can feel it, they can sense it, they can smell it. It's not an illusion in that term. What I mean by an illusion, it is a manufactured reality, and it is manufactured monetarily, legally, religiously, global politically. Everything is manufactured to a certain end, to a certain means. And when you understand this game of chess, which again is talking about the metaphor of duality, the game of chess, you begin to realize, if you do begin to realize it's an illusion, you then start to enhance yourself. Now, for me, coming into knowledge, or being given knowledge, or being shown through that hypercommunication, things as an idea, things planted into my head, has raised my vibrations enough to see beyond that illusion. I still live in it. I'm still affected by it. I still have to roll with the punches of the same reality. I have the same struggles as everybody else, even knowing what I know, knowing what you know, you have the same struggles as well. In fact, in many respects, it's even harder. There's even more struggles because it makes no sense. Now, for people who are ignorant of this, things seem to make more sense to them in this world. When you start to have this greater information, this greater knowledge, I think it makes it a lot more difficult to exist in this fake illusion. And that really, I have no answers as to how you can overcome that. The only answer I would have is work on yourself. Make yourself the best tuned vessel that you can possibly make yourself. Then your life will just naturally change. And if you do all of these things, if you cut out as much of the illusion as you can, if you go with that order within chaos, create for you the best life that you can possibly create for you. And regardless of what everybody else is doing, regardless of a world that tries to drag you into competition, drag yourself into the creative mind, not the competitive mind, and be the best that you can be for yourself. Have the best life, or create the best reality, create the best life that you can for you. Do what you enjoy doing and try and make a profession out of what you enjoy doing, because then your life will change. And I think that really is probably the best advice that I can give. Be the best that you can be.
That's awesome advice, Michael. I really love that. And that's really all we could do. And that's what I'm doing personally. I'm by no means perfect, and I'm a far ways from where I want to go, but I'm working on myself. And I know there's that saying is, love you just as you are, but, keep working, on yourself, so it's really important. So thank you for giving that advice for the people out there. Let me, I had a couple more points I wanted to address while I have you here, Michael. And I know the listeners would also be very interested. So let's talk a little bit about the Anunnaki. Does the Anunnaki story have a deeper meaning than is portrayed by Zachariah Stitchin and some of the other academics?
Yes, it does. Again, I've looked into this story out of personal interest and out of that extra piece of the jigsaw of what I call the ancient code. Yes, it does. When you look at the story of the Anunnaki now, I've seen extraterrestrials, I've seen unorthodox craft in the sky, I've stood next to beings that are not from this world. So I understand and I realise that we are not the only existence on this planet or in the solar system or in the universe. I know that because I've personally witnessed it. Now, when I look at the Zachariah Sitchin that tells you about this Anunnaki that came from heaven to earth, they brought the moon with them, they tinkered with genetics of what they found life on earth and created the modern Homo sapien, the intelligent man. When they mined for gold with their planet Nibiru, it always to me seemed again a bit that there's something amiss, there's something not quite right. Now, when I look at the Anunnaki story, it fits perfectly in with the rest of the ancient world in what it's telling us. And it really is a metaphor for geometric creation. And when you look at it, when you look at the likes of their chief gods, for argument's sake, when you look at Anu, who was the chief god of the Anunnaki. Now, Anu, when you look at one of the most ancient language of Earth, which was Sanskrit, Anu means atom. Now, when you look at Enki and Enlil, who were known as the Shetty, the Snake Brothers, that is the double helix of DNA. So we have atom and DNA. When you look at Alalu, who's meant to be the chief, the supervisor of the mining operation from Earth to planet Nibiru, etc., Alalu basically means wave genetics. So again, we're keeping in with genetics. When we see this mysterious handbag that the Anunnaki are carrying and other ancient cultures are depicting, that really is esoteric for genetics. And when you look at the handle of the handbag, it forms an 180-degree arch, which is basically the perfect binding angle of hydrogen bonding for DNA, which again is your Enki and Enlil. When you look at the square bag itself, that is the Punnett square, which is germates, which is the union of germs that create the fertilization event. That is the mystery of this famous handbag. It is genetic information. Now, when you take that to planet Nibiru, and Nibiru simply means wandering planet. Now, when you look at the Egyptian astrologists, they call the planet Venus Neb-Heru because it was a wandering planet. So you have Nibiru and you have Neb-Heru, which is the planet Venus. Now, the significance of that is when you look at the Sanskrit word for Venus, it's Shukra, which means seminal secretion. Now, Enki is also associated with semen, with fertility, so is Jesus Christ. Now, Jesus Christ is supposedly an incarnation of Enki. So it goes all the way to the morning star, it goes through to Enki, it goes through to Venus. When you actually look at the Anunnaki scrolls, they didn't say that Nibiru was the home planet of the Anunnaki. They said it was Duku, D-U-K-U, which basically means sacred mound. It's the Mons Veronis, the mound of Venus, which is the pubic bone, which again is talking about fertility. It's basically all talking about genetics. It's talking about the fertilization event. It's talking about geometric creation, and it was something greater than an alien race that put it here. Now, when Sitchin tells you that the Anunnaki brought the moon to Earth, now that was meant to have been 450,000 years ago. Now, when you look at tidal rhythmites on Earth, which are basically marks that are created by lunar movement on the Earth, these tidal rhythmites are scientifically proven to be 2.2 billion years old, which means that the moon was in its current location at least 2.2 billion years ago, which blows out of the water the Anunnaki theory that they brought the moon 450,000 years ago. Now, without the moon, as with the sun, there is no higher life on Earth. The moon keeps the Earth at a 23.5 degree tilt, which ironically is the handle of the Masonic compass. Now, that 23.5 degree tilt gives us the four seasons. It gives us oceans that are liquid. It gives us a habitable warmth throughout the planet. The Anunnaki did not bring the moon with them. It was here at least 2.2 billion years ago. The Earth and the moon have the same oxygen isotopes, oxygen chemicals, which means they were created in the same area or the same region of space. The moon was not brought here. Now, when you start chipping away at stories like this and you start scientifically disproving them, you disprove the whole story. Now, this story of fertility, this story of, again, raised consciousness. Now, when you see the Anunnaki carrying the pine cone is pineal. When you see them wearing what looks like a wristwatch, that is the Gilgal, the Google. That is basically higher knowledge, the gateway, the biblical chariot, the biblical wheel, which is the Merkaba, which is the vehicle to a higher consciousness. It's telling us the same message as the Egyptians, the same message as the Mayans, the same message as the Peruvians, the same message as the Babylonians, the same message as the writers of biblical scripture. It is talking about consciousness, it is talking about fertility, and it's talking about geometric creation. We are being left.
Is this the same message as Google, the company Google, that controls most of the internet? Yeah.
Google comes from Gilgal, which basically means wheel. It is the feminine noun of Galilee. Now, Galilee, when Jesus walks above the water in Galilee, Galgoloth, which means the head, which is Golgotha, which is the skull. But the feminine noun of Galilee is Gilgoth, which is Gilgal. And again, it's talking about consciousness. So even Google talking about it, Firefox. What is the Firefox? A fox is spiritual awareness, and the fire is Kundalini awakening. They're all telling us the same thing, which is consciousness.
Yeah, and you know what I find interesting right now, Michael, is that everything that you're touching upon is very esoteric and occultic. A lot of different subjects over the last 2,000 years we kind of went over for the last hour and 20 minutes or so here. We look at all that, and then I'm also interviewing academics that are literally studying every single unit or thing that we're talking about, but more in a scientific way. So it's really interesting. They're studying consciousness, they're studying mind expanding so-called drugs, You know, there's a lot of controversy there, but it is happening. They're studying the science of philosophy. They're studying alternative religion. So we're seeing all these different academics, you know, at these institutions being dedicated to these sciences of gnosis, essentially what it is. You know, so it's interesting that we see this happening. You're able to, of course, you know, write your books and talk about this freely. I am, you know, I believe for the most part, you have had some issues with you. I believe, in my case, I've also had some issues where things have happened that were nefarious, that I felt were by the powers that be. But neither here nor there. I see that if you stick in a specific realm, you don't get too conspiratorial and you do not reveal too much, that you can operate, you can share this gnosis with the world, you can perfect thyself, you can make money and hopefully not sell your soul to the devil, you know, in a Christian sense, right? But you get what I'm saying here. We have that freedom right now, and I find it that it's incredible where this hasn't really happened for any time before in recent history, correct?
I think that's correct. And again, when you look at the modern day scientists that are analysing consciousness, that are analysing how these things affect the brain, this is not modern. This is not science. This is not a modern philosophy. This is an ancient. They knew this thousands of years ago. So the scientists of the modern day that are saying, we've come up with this theory, we've come up with this solution, they are 4 or 5, maybe 10, 20,000 years behind what the ancients knew about what they are now studying in modern day science. So it's not a modern philosophy. It is not a modern science. Science, again, just means to know, but they knew many thousands of years ago before modern day scientists are even thought about what they're now starting to study. So we are now in an age where information is readily available. We have Google, we have the Gilgal, we have the consciousness, we have, you know, the opportunity now to learn these things. We have the opportunity now to piece these things together. And when we start to piece these things together, your reality, the picture of your reality will change. And, you know, yes, I started in a spiritual sense. I could have sold my soul to the devil. I could have joined these Illuminatis. I could have joined these secret societies. I haven't, because for me, this information, everyone has the right to this information, and it should be out there for everyone to see and have access to if they want to. They don't have to. There is no force involved. You know, people don't have to sit here for an hour and a half and listen to you and I. They can switch off and do something else. But for those who are interested in bettering themselves, for me, some people go to baseball, some people go to football. You know, in the UK, they'll go to soccer or they'll go and have a drink after work. For me, learning, researching is my passion. And that is what really drives me to know. If I know more tomorrow than I did today, that keeps my fire burning. And I guarantee that I will know more tomorrow than I do today, because I will make sure that I do. And that really is my passion, and that is what raises me. That is what helps me to see beyond the illusion. Even though I struggle as much as anybody else within it, and I operate as much as anybody else within it, I see it for what it is. And as I said earlier, you know, the best you can do in your own little miniature universe is be the brightest star that you can be. And if you are the brightest star that you can be, you will attract other stars that are equally as bright as you. That is how you start creating this network, and all of a sudden you become a supernova. That is really, in a world that is trying to keep you down and is spent many hundreds of thousands of years, lots and lots of effort trying to keep people down, there are still people breaking through and are still seeing it. So it must be very demoralizing for that all that effort to see people still seeing it and still getting it. Be the brightest star you can possibly be. And that really is the difference that you can make to yourself. Then your reality changes.
That's beautiful advice. I think it's important that you emphasize there that, you know, either, you know, since you have this great knowledge, you're studying it, but you're still struggle like everybody else out there, and I do as well. It is tough because we do live in a game of duality, and you know, making money, I think, is the hardest part for us philosophers or us on the Gnostic path. and it's important that you also are balanced as well, so you consume this knowledge, whether it's podcasts, whether you're reading books like Michael's great books. It's important that you're balanced with everything that you do with your family, with exercise, because you could sit on these computers too long, right? I'm sure you've been guilty of that too. I do it almost every day, but I try to get balanced with my exercise, try to turn it off as well. What are some of the things you do to stay balanced, and what advice can you give to the people out there?
Again, part of the ancient secret, a part of the ancient enlightenment, could only be achieved through the balance of self. Now, that is, that balance of duality, which is masculine, feminine, positive, negative. It can only be achieved through balance. For me, it is important to walk down the center path. And if I feel something is taking too much of my time, things are becoming unbalanced. If I'm spending too much time on the computer or whatever and not spending time with wife and family, I can feel a sense of unbalance. It's important to then bring it back to the center ground. If you remain in center ground, you are balanced. You are the 10 Commandments. You are the symbol of Osiris. You are tying the knot. You are adhering to that chemical marriage of masculine and feminine. You must learn to feel that intuition, that hyper communication is part of your intuition, your guardian angel, whatever you want to call it. You start to feel your own spirit level will tell you when you're off balance, bring you back around to that central ground, and that is the way that you will keep elevating yourself. When you start looking at the new craze, which again, the new age, which I've spent time in, when you start to realize that that actually comes from the Order of the Golden Dawn, which is a left-hand path society, which is black magic, they will tell you, and I've done talks and I've been to whatever, to these new age events, they will say you must only concentrate on the light, you must not concentrate on the dark. That is creating an imbalance of self. That is creating 50% concentration and ignoring the other 50%. You will never reach enlightenment by just concentrating on one or the other. You have to balance both opposites in order to become one. That is where that is the principle that the new age is getting completely wrong. You must be balanced. You must be down that center ground.
I think I had a little issue there with my mic for a second. Yeah. Carl Jung talks about integrating the shadow, and Jordan Peterson, who is a big philosopher right now for people that might not so be interested in, the esoteric occult or Gnosticism, but just general philosophy. He talks about integrating the shadow, and that a lot of it deals with walking the middle path. It's recognizing that dark side of yourself and integrating it. Maybe shedding some of the things that are maybe evil of that shadow that you dislike, but integrating the good things of the shadow and integrating it with the light, so you're more balanced, because we do live in a world that has a lot of darkness and a lot of shadows. So, it's been great talking to you today, Michael. And before we wrap up the show, do you want to let the audience know where they could find your great work and some of your books?
Absolutely, thank you. And again, evil, turn the word evil around, it becomes live in the now. The Egyptian, 2 lions back to back, yesterday and tomorrow. Your ascension is in the now, so live in the now. You can find me on www.michael-feeley.com, which is Feeley. There's lots and lots of free stuff on there, newsletters, blogs, all kinds of stuff on there. So that is really the epicenter of where you can find me.
It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Like I'd said, I've learned a lot. I could talk to you for another couple hours, but I know we're limited on time. So let's plan maybe in the next 4 to 6 months we'll revisit this. I know you do a lot of work, and you're doing a lot of writing, and you do some speaking as well. So yeah, the audience, if you'd like to find more of his work, please go to his website. You could tune in to the show page on Gnostic Warrior. I will have links to his website and to his books. Hey, thank you again for your time. It was great for you sharing the Gnosis with the audience. Take care, Michael.
Thank you. Take care.
You're welcome.